Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the February 9th, 2026 meeting of the Institutional Risk and Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the February 9th, 2026 meeting of the Institutional Risk and Compliance Committee of the University of Rhode Island Board of Trustees. The meeting is being held in person with committee members participating remotely. At this time, Interim Board Secretary Emily Diamandis will conduct a roll call attendance to determine if a quorum is present. Please clearly respond present via WebEx or present in person when your name is called.
Okay. Robbie Luna,
Present via WebEx.
Matthew Lenz,
Present via WebEx.
Joseph Formicola,
Present via WebEx.
David Martirano,
Present via WebEx.
Ryan Estes,
Present via WebEx.
David Caprio, Michael Gray, Mark Parlange.
Present on WebEx.
And then I'd also just like to recognize we have Board Chair Margot Cook and Vice Chair Armin Sabatoni on the call as well. Robbie, we have a quorum all set.
Excellent. Just a reminder to all members, for the benefit of our audience and the note taker, please clearly identify yourself whenever you comment, make a motion, or second to a motion. Participants using WebEx are required as remote members, and all persons present at the meeting location must be clearly audible and visible to each other. At this time, I would like to acknowledge that the University of Rhode Island occupies the traditional stomping ground of the Narragansett Nation and the Niantic people. Are there any proposed amendments to the published agenda? There being none, the first order of business is approval of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the October 28th, 2025 meeting?
So moved, Joe.
Seconded, Matt Lenz.
Any discussion on the motion? There being no discussion, I'll ask for a voice vote. All in favor, please say yes.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. The next is agenda discussion items. We have 3 discussion items: the review of the university's non-discrimination plan, review of compliance with standards governing the conduct of research, and the third is update on NCAA agreed upon procedures and single audit. I'll ask Abby Benson to cover review of the university's non-discrimination plan.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you. I am here today to give an update and introduce members of my team to help with this update on our changes over the last year to federal and state affirmative action programs and corresponding URI actions. As you can imagine, this has been an area of great flux over the last year. We're also going to give an overview of the 2024-2025 state non-discrimination plan, formerly called the State Affirmative Action Plan. That also includes an overview of trends in URI workforce representation, our applicants and hires. So to give this update, I want to introduce Dorcas Smalley, who's the director of the Office of Equal Opportunity at URI, and she's going to walk you through our slides today. I also, while the slides get pulled up, I want to recognize AVP Kara Larson. She runs our Enterprise Risk Management Office, and the Office of Equal Opportunity is under that office. She's also on the call. Great, I'm going to turn it over to you, Dorca.
Thank you, Abby. Good morning, everyone. I am sharing my screen. Would you please nod if you can see my screen? Wonderful.
You can see it.
So I am pleased to join you today to discuss the non-discrimination plan, formerly referred to as the State Affirmative Action Plan. The presentation you're about to see has been a team effort. I'd like to recognize my supervisor, who was so gracious in approving the recommendations I made regarding the content changes you'll see today, as well as our vice president, who is very engaged in the review process, always providing meaningful feedback. So on the agenda today, we would like to discuss Executive Orders 14173, 11246, and 14035. We're also going to highlight the state and federal reporting requirements and do a year in review. share some of the updates and the tremendous work our team has done over the last year. We're also going to highlight.
Dorca, I don't mean to interrupt, but we're still seeing the cover slide. Are you advancing slides?
Yeah, I think it's actually being shared by the board office now, so.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
There we go.
Wonderful. So I am
Thank
on
you.
slide 2. Fantastic. So we'll introduce you to a year in review. The work our team has done over the last year, as well as workforce representation highlights involving faculty and staff representation, as well as applicants and new hires. We'll highlight some trends for fiscal year 23 and 24, and some of the goals that we have set for ourselves for fiscal year 25 and 26. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So Executive Orders 14173 and 11246 and 14035 have really been impacted over the last year in terms of the administration of civil rights compliance. Executive Order 14173 was introduced last January, and I think all of you are aware. It was titled Ending Illegal Discrimination and Restoring Merit-Based Opportunity. That executive order got a lot of attention because it revoked Executive Order 11246, which previously set the standards for affirmative action compliance. There has not been a lot of discussion on the impact of that order in terms of Executive Order 14035, but we wanted to share some trends here and highlight some terms that you may be familiar with. What you need to know about Executive Order 1246 is that it introduced the standards for affirmative action compliance, and it required subcontractors such as the University of Rhode Island or federal contractors to take positive steps to increase employment opportunities for all, especially for minorities, females, the elderly, who are people 40 and older. Unfortunately, that's how the federal government defines elderly, and also disabled. Next slide, please. Executive Order 1246 was previously enforced by the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, which due to the revocation, the office was encouraged to cease promoting diversity, to stop holding federal contractors and subcontractors responsible for taking affirmative action. And it was also encouraged to cease allowing or encouraging federal contractors to engage in workforce balancing, using protected status as a basis for employment decisions. Let's go to the next slide. Executive Order 14173, introduced last January, encouraged all agencies and mandated all agencies to combat illegal diversity, equity, and inclusion preferences in programs, policies, or activities. There has been a lot of conversation about illegal DEI, but how does the federal government define illegal DEI? Let's go to the next slide. Illegal DEI was previously defined, well, diversity, equity, and inclusion was defined by the federal government in 2024 under the previous administration, which introduced Executive Order 14035 and defined diversity as the practice of including many communities, identities, and races, ethnicities, backgrounds, abilities, cultures, and beliefs, including underserved community. Equity was defined as the consistent and systemic, fair, just, and impartial treatment of all individuals, including individuals who belong to underserved communities who have been denied such treatment. Inclusion was defined as the recognition, appreciation, and use of talents and skills of employees of all backgrounds. On its face, these terms are benign. They're pretty neutral. Now, illegal DEI relates to using protected status as a basis for making employment decisions, which was encouraged under Executive Order 11246, even though it was a violation of Title VII. Illegal DEI, what this current administration refers to as illegal DEI, is also conducting underrepresentation studies by comparing your workforce to the population availability or the labor force availability, and then setting recruitment goals or outreach goals using protected status as a basis. So basically, the executive order introduced last year encouraged required all agencies to stop using workforce balancing by developing and doing underrepresentation analysis. Next slide, please. So while a federal affirmative action plan is no longer required, since Executive Order 11246 has been revoked, the Office of Federal Contract Compliance still enforces and has an affirmative action program, which we refer to as permissible affirmative action, doing targeted outreach for individuals with disabilities and veterans. And they're under Rhode Island general law, particularly Chapter 28. We still have statutes that require fair employment practices. One of them is called Equal Opportunity and Affirmative Action. And Rhode Island General Law Chapter 28 requires the submission of an annual non-discrimination plan, which was previously called Affirmative Action Plan. Let's go to the next slide. So a year in review, a lot has happened on the civil rights compliance front over the last year. And our team is used to it. This happens every 4 years, regardless of what administration is in office. So because of the actions that have taken place at the federal and state level, the university has updated the definition of affirmative action compliance. It's not completely outlawed. As I mentioned, disabled individuals and those who are veterans still benefit from affirmative action programs. We have also updated the footer included with the official university letterhead. The Civil Rights Compliance Toolkit for employee recruitment, selection, and hiring. Procurement and vendor forms have been updated to reflect new guidelines, and they have been updated multiple times throughout the last 4 years, so that it's not limited to this current changes. The university has also updated the Equal Employment Opportunity Statement included with job postings. The Office of Equal Opportunity website has been updated, or affirmative action tab now reads equal employment opportunity to be more general and attract and cover different topics, not just permissible affirmative action. We have also updated the fiscal year 24-25 non-discrimination plan. Next slide, please. So you can learn more about the changes that we have made by visiting our website and clicking on the QR code. I'm sure you have a copy of these slides. There's a lot of meaningful information there. Let's go to the next slide, please. So in terms of the non-discrimination plan highlights, I'm very proud of what we are going to introduce you to. If we can go ahead and move to the next slide. So the reporting period, as you're aware, the workforce data is for the year prior, so fiscal year 24. And then the plans and goals that we established was for fiscal year 25. I'm really proud that we have met every goal we set for ourselves. And I encourage you to access the plan by going to that QR code we showed you previously and reviewing Part D of the plan. There's a lot of really good information there. The plan was updated and submitted to the state on November 18, and it was executed right away, and it can be found on our website. Let's go to the next slide. So the standards for the collection of demographic data have not changed. We have 7 standards, which have been listed here. The standard for sex reporting has always been male or female. That has not changed. What has changed is the way in which we report the data, not how we collect it, not how we maintain it. Let's go to the next slide, please. Next one. So you may be wondering what this representation in the workforce looks like. For fiscal year 24, we had almost 16% of our workforce identified as a member of minority groups, almost 83 as white. This is pretty standard based on the workforce availability. 51% were male, 57% female. The majority of our workforce in our cabinet is female. Almost 3% of our staff identified as disabled and 1.51% as veterans. Let's go to the next slide. Now, when we look at the trends, if comparing fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 25, there was a slight increase in the representation of minorities and individuals with disabilities in the workforce. There was a slight decrease, nothing statistically significant as it relates to individuals who identified as white, as male, and as veteran. Let's go to the next slide. In terms of applicants versus new hires, there was an increase in the number of minorities hired from one fiscal year to the other. In fiscal year 24, 19.23% of the applicants were minorities versus 19.77% in fiscal year 25. And you can pretty much see an increase across every category with the exception of disabled and veterans. So that tells us that we need to do more outreach to reach those populations. Let's go to the next slide. Now, when we look at the trend here for applicants versus new hires, you can see again a slight increase in the minorities engaged, as well as the individuals identifying as female. This tells us where we need to focus our outreach. But again, unlike before the revocation of Executive Order 11246, we are no longer setting goals using protected status as a basis for outreach or any employment decisions. Let's go to the next slide. So in terms of our goals that we have established for ourselves, and these are neutral goals, we have noticed that when the applicant pool increases, so there's a number of new hires. So we are going to continue to make all job postings available to every individual without regard to their protected status. Some of the things that we have been planning to do during fiscal year 2026 is issue a Roti Today announcement summarizing changes that took place, including the new non-discrimination plan. The announcement will be disseminated to the Council of Deans and all employees. We are planning to host a two-part series, lunch and learn event on the topic of permissible affirmative action and non-discrimination, and also preventing discrimination in hiring and recruitment. A lot of our work requires collaboration, and the Office of Human Resources and the Office of the General Counsel are essential partners in the work that the Office of Equal Opportunity does. We are going to be partnering to update the Human Resources training on employee recruitment, selection, and hiring, and also to review position descriptions requiring changes. Some of these actions have been taking place currently.
Hey, Dork, sorry to interrupt. President Perlange has his hand raised, has a question. Mark?
Wonderful.
Thanks, Robbie. Dorka, do you mind going back 2 slides? Maybe it was going too fast and I may have missed something. Yeah, right there. I'm trying to understand applicants, male, female in blue.
Mm-hmm.
How that doesn't add up to 100%?
Yes, so that is a great question, President Perlange. Under permissible affirmative action compliance, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and the Office of Management and Budget, they set the standards for data collection. Any racial or ethnic data, so as gender, disability status, or veteran status, collected for applicants has to be collected voluntarily, unlike employees. So for applicants, we have no obligation to go beyond voluntary data collection. Some people don't report their data because they think it may hurt them or because they're not interested. All we can do is invite them to self-disclose. So for the purposes of this presentation, we decided to exclude the percentage of the people who did not self-disclose. But Section D of the Affirmative Action Plan takes a deeper dive and breaks down those percentages.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This is Armin. Was Executive Order 14173, did anybody contest it? Is it in the court system or no one did anything?
Executive orders are issued
Well,
by.
no, just, yeah, 14173, which repealed 11246 and 1435.
Yes, can you clarify your question, please?
Excuse me?
I am not sure I understand the
Well,
question.
it was an executive order by the president.
Mhm.
My recollection was he did it on his first day in office. Did anybody take an action as to his authority to do that?
No, to my knowledge, both executive orders have been revoked, and as of today, it has not been challenged. The guidance that we have received from the federal enforcement agencies is they have adopted what the president has required. So much so that the standards for reporting the affirmative action plans have changed, and the federal government no longer requires a federal affirmative action plan. Prior to the revocation of Executive Order 11246, every year we completed our federal affirmative action plan. I had to log in and certify and sign. The Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs is no longer requiring that. There's a lot of chatter that the office is currently being dismantled, and this year we will receive some guidance regarding where some of those programs will go, because as I mentioned earlier, affirmative action programs for disabled and veterans are still a requirement.
Well, that's
And
still
always-
live, I understand, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'll also just provide some additional context, which is we're talking very clearly about the affirmative action, like changes to that program, but all related matters have really been in discussion and analysis with our leadership team on federal actions, which is the team that the president appointed with a number of cabinet members and experts to review all sort of changes coming out of the federal government, the impact to URI, the impact to potential contracts. So I know Alyssa's on the call. Really appreciate the partnership of Office of General Counsel, kind of helping us work through how we react to what's coming out of the federal government in terms of all this new guidance. So
Yeah,
just
Alyssa,
so you know.
was there a Supreme Court case that was, I don't think it was close to this, but was there one around the time he did this? That's all, I mean, I was aware of it
I think she's
before.
on mute.
You're on mute.
All right, that's all right. All
Sorry
right,
about
let's
that.
move on.
Can you hear me now? Sorry about that. In terms of these particular, there have been different actions related to implementation of DEI policies by different agencies. In terms of this particular executive order, it was challenged and certain aspects of it were enjoined in district court, but then the appellate court in the Fourth Circuit overturned that. So it's not that they've said per se that all elements of the executive order will be implemented in a constitutional way, but they're saying it's not unconstitutional on its face. So it's possible the ways in which it becomes implemented, the things that the agencies do pursuant to the order may still be challenged, but the executive order itself, as of now, at least in the Fourth Circuit, is still upheld.
Thanks.
What's the, what is, and I want to get in the middle if you're still presenting, but I'm curious if you can answer this now or after. Like, what has the impact been in terms of like how we're hiring, how we think about enacting these this executive order, and maybe in the context of what you're talking about with your peers at other schools? Like, has this had a chilling impact, or has it not necessarily changed what we're doing? It's just, you know, different words on a page, or give us like the how this is feeling.
Sure, that is a great question. It has not impacted how we hire, because as a university, we've never used protected status as a basis to make employment decisions. Before the revocation of Executive Order 11246, I introduced training for staff, and what we have been telling them is that at the time, affirmative action ended during outreach. It required you to make employment opportunities available to all with emphasis on certain groups. And we encourage at the time individuals to make all employment opportunities available and to conduct outreach as needed. It has changed the way in which we approach our outreach. But other than that, I wouldn't say it has had a significant impact. When we come back next year to do this presentation again, you will notice that the number of applicants that we were able to engage in fiscal year 25 was significantly higher. And I think that's a testament to our deans and hiring authorities, but also the number of individuals represented in our workforce. It was a tremendous year in terms of the increases that we saw. So I give a lot of credit to our hiring authorities and our HR partners, talent acquisition specialists, for the tremendous work they have done.
Good.
Any other questions?
Has anyone been, has any university gotten caught up in not complying? Maybe
Yes.
Alyssa, you've heard,
I would
or
defer to
Dorga.
Alyssa on.
Yeah, so the executive order itself is an order to the agencies of the executive branch to implement certain policies. So the executive order itself is not something that the universities comply with. Ultimately, it's the agency actions that come out as a result of the executive order that we have to comply with. And definitely there has been an increase in enforcement activity by the agencies. For instance, you know, the PhD project is one that's been challenged.
Right.
And so there has been a lot of enforcement activity. And like the executive order, the Dear Colleague letter that came out, a Department of Justice letter came out. The Dear Colleague letter was overturned in court, and the administration recently dropped their appeal on that. But it doesn't really matter because they're still carrying out the goal and intent of what was included in the Dear Colleague letter through the actions of the agencies. And so I think where we're really going to see the rubber meet the road is in the particular challenges of the particular agency actions. As those things start coming to court, we're going to start seeing where the line is on the constitutionality of the actions of the agencies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dorka.
Thank you.
I think that concludes our first agenda item.
Okay. The second agenda item is review of compliance with standards governing the conduct of research. I'll ask Bethany Jenkins to introduce this this item.
Good morning. I'm here today. Thank you so much. And we're happy to provide an update to this committee. And I'd like my colleague, Elizabeth Buchanan, who's our Associate Vice President for Research Administration, to do this presentation on behalf of my team.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, members of the Board of Trustees, President Parlange, Provost Wolf, esteemed colleagues. It's really nice to see everyone. I realize this is my third year now presenting to this group on behalf of the Division of Research and Economic Development. The next slide, please. I'll start with just some acknowledgements. This has been a year following from Dorka's presentation. You'll hear similar themes around the executive orders, but I really want to acknowledge the staff of the Division of Research and Economic Development, as well as our colleagues in the Office of General Counsel. It's been like a ping pong game this year with these executive orders, grant terminations, as I'll discuss in a minute. But without these teams and colleagues around this in this meeting, we wouldn't have gotten through it. So it really is a team effort. So thank you, Alyssa, and to your team. With that, I think we can go to the next slide. This may look familiar to you. I shared this slide from the Committee on Congressional Relations last year. This graphic shows the number of regulations, policies adapted, adopted, and or substantially changed in the interpretation of regulations affecting federal research since 1991. So all the way on the far left of the slide goes back to 1991. and then up to, on this slide, 2024. And you'll see 181% increase in just the last 10 years of these rules, regulations, policies affecting the conduct and administration of federal research. What's interesting, that 1991 point is when a 26% cap on administrative costs was implemented. So all of these changes, new regulations, new practices, and so forth, have had to really be borne by the universities. The costs are not covered in the administrative costs in doing federal research. If you go to the next slide, please. And I just want to quickly show that last data point, which is this past year, 2025. And we've had a significant number of changes this year alone that have impacted how we do research, how we do research administration. And this affects all of us. This affects our faculty, our research staff, anyone involved in the conduct of research. Next slide, please. So before I get into what we've gone through, I do want to highlight some of our accomplishments from this year. And when I presented last year, we had a number of changes around these federal updates and so forth that needed to be implemented. These are things that affect things like processes, policies, staffing, and so on and so forth. So we implemented to a certain extent where we could uniform guidance changes. There are still a few pending. I won't get into the nitty-gritty of it, but there are a significant number of uniform guidance changes have been implemented. Because there was a new policy requirement from the Office of Research Integrity, we did initiate a new policy on research misconduct. We also, in response to federal agency requirements, we implemented new research security training and new export controls training. These are required for just about all the federal agencies. There's some deadline differences, but we as an institution did implement an agency-wide requirement for research security training. In collaboration with Dorca's office, we unveiled a new civil rights compliance training that all of our PIs take. And then finally, we implemented a new policy on the conflict of commitment in research. So those were just a few of the high-level things that we implemented just this past year. And I want to acknowledge the impact that this does take on our faculty. The trainings range anywhere from an hour, depending on which one you take. Some of the research security training can take up to 4 hours. So these are not small requirements on top of everything else that our faculty are doing. Next slide, please. Okay. Oops, sorry. Okay, so as we heard from Dorca, this year has been impacted by the executive orders that started right around January 26th, I think it was last year, or 20th. Seems like much longer than a year, but there have been some estimates from COGR and other higher ed institutions saying that there are at least 15 executive orders that have directly impacted institutions of higher education and more specifically research. So with that, next slide, please. So with that, what were the impacts at URI? I think many of us will remember late January of last year when we started to receive terminations from the USAID projects. URI had 5 projects at the time. These were very large international projects. They had great reach. Some of them had been going on here for many years. And the terminations came fast and furious. We did ultimately get one of the projects restored, but 4 of the others went completely terminated. I'm sorry, I can't see if anyone has questions, so I'll be sure to pause if questions come up. So the USAID terminations were a big portion of our portfolio that did get terminated. And I'll leave it at that. Dorka talked about the diversity, equity, and inclusion a little bit. An executive order affected grants that were flagged as having DEI-related content. Some of those did come back online. If you think back to the early days, some of this was being done based on keywords that were being identified in things like grant abstracts. So further examination, some appeals showed that these truly weren't DEI related. Then around April, we started seeing from the agencies proposals to cut the facilities and administrative costs. So at URI, our F&A rate is 57%, 57.5%, and the agencies proposed to have a flat 15% F&A rate. So just think about the math of what we would have lost in our F&A. Many of those did go through the courts, and just recently the NIH rate cut was quashed. So that one, we don't have to worry about that for now. We haven't seen any other agencies push the reduced F&A. There is a lot at the federal level. Again, COGR, Committee on Congressional Relations, has been doing a lot of work looking at alternative models to F&A. So this is something that that folks in my space pay a lot of attention to because of the impact it could have on our research portfolio. Then on the financial side of the house, early on, the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, which is now fortunately disbanded, it came out with what they were calling additional financial reviews. So the process has been very straightforward. We do the work, we submit our invoices. The invoice is aligned with the scope of work, what activities were completed, and the costs. And then DOGE decided that that was not sufficient and wanted all kinds of elaborate justifications. And if you think about the scope and scale, how many invoices we're submitting, every institution across the country, and then looking at page after page of justification, it couldn't scale. Things were delayed, things were behind, and then fortunately that also kind of fell off the radar. Another impact that we saw resulting from the executive orders were all kinds of revised terms and conditions on our grants. What this did was it required my staff and many folks on Alyssa's staff to be looking, excuse me, very even more closely than we typically do, looking for things in revised terms and conditions that would affect the way we accept awards, conduct our research. So we had to ensure, for example, that they didn't put in a clause saying, if allowed by a court, the F&A rate would be 15%. So we had to just every award that came in, line by line, very, very careful reviews to ensure that there was nothing in there that could potentially affect us down the road. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we had, as I've said, this year has been a challenge. There were many things coming at our teams, every day being forced to respond. So what did we do? How did we get through the day? We couldn't have done it without the help of campus. The leadership team, thank you for getting together every week. I think you all met at least twice a week, maybe more in the beginning, to have a federal response team. We came up with a dedicated communication channel and advised our campus, any communication that you get from program officers, from federal agencies, please send it to this one address so that we have an archive. Everybody that was on the list could see what was happening in real time. And that was really effective. We still use that list. We still see things come through from time to time, though it fortunately has slowed down. On my team side, we really had to think through the operational pieces of this. So we developed operational working groups where we reworked our processes, our workflows. We had to develop trackers for managing the terminations, managing appeals, and then fortunately we did have some reinstatements. But all of that, it doesn't jive with our normal workflows, as you can imagine. Very rarely have we had grants terminated in the past, and certainly not for the reasons we saw this year. So it really caused us to have to pivot and be really quick, to the point where one of my team members was asked to present at a conference on the new workflows that we came up for the software that we use. So we were, we made lemonade out of lemons, I guess, to the extent we could. We had to come up with new statuses for our systems. And then we also came up with a tracker for revised terms and conditions so that we could see, okay, we already checked with Alyssa's team. We've seen this term. Okay, we can accept this. So there wasn't as much duplication of effort. And then finally, and this I really want to thank Bethany for her leadership, we had numerous declarations for and with our colleagues at the Rhode Island Attorney General's office. These were things around the impact of the F&A rate, some of the cancellations, terminations that we had, and Bethany spent many weekends working through these very detailed documents. And fortunately, we've seen a good outcome from some of those declarations. So with that, I have a few resources, if you're interested, at the next slide, that can help you with the executive orders that I've mentioned, if you're interested in the work that COGR does, and then certainly our colleagues at the Association of Public Land Grant Universities, APLU, who has also put on a lot of webinars and meetings this year to help us as a community. So I'm happy to take any questions or clarify, and thank you for your time.
Well, first of all, thank you for all the work that went into this. I know it wasn't the type of work that you were seeking, but it also kept the university safe. So we appreciate that.
Thank you.
This is going to sound, this is an honest question. Is there anything good that came out of this? Like, oh, we hadn't really thought about how we approach something this way, or any efficiency? Like, is there anything good that came out of this, or is it?
That's a good question. We might still be too close to it to be able to say that. I think if anything, it showed us the resiliency that we have as a team, as a campus, as a community. I mean, it's challenging because in my world, we always are looking for process improvement, but on our terms, and this was not on our terms. So I think that was the challenge, that we had to just keep pivoting. And here's a good example. So okay, we came up with our process. I hated this. I always said I don't want to get good at this, but we got good at it for a while. And then you might remember a few weeks ago, the SAMHSA grants were terminated. So we kicked into gear, started our process, which takes hours per grant, and then the next day they were unterminated. So from that, I will say now we're of a mindset. Okay, we're gonna slow start our process, give it 48 hours before we fully kick it in, because with this administration, with this environment, it's just so volatile, right? And so we're learning to act, but strategically.
Yeah, thank you.
Penny, you have a question for Elizabeth?
Yeah, I just had a comment to share too, and it's another just level of acknowledgement. So a lot of the work that Elizabeth talked about was also prepared and updated weekly, really under Barb's leadership as provost and the leadership team for federal actions. And so we also had a kind of live information so that weekly meeting could draw on this information that Elizabeth and our other teams supported. So I would say the only good thing that came out of this in my mind is just, a very coordinated approach at the university. It's really easy to eat your own when this kind of thing happens, and we didn't do that. And we have been systematic and resilient, and a lot of it was just kind of building the plane as we were flying it to deal with these processes. But I feel like we as a team were able to support the university and supply other leaders with the information that they needed to make decisions.
Thank you. Any, let's see, President Perlonch, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, thanks, Robbie. Elizabeth went fast at one point through it, but I just wanted to reiterate Bethany and Alyssa and Barb, there were a number of times on a Friday afternoon, they were asked to provide information for the Attorney General later that afternoon, and that was able to be done very rapidly, and so that was quite impressive to me. So thank you for that.
Excellent. Any more questions? There being none, I'll go ahead and move to the third item here. Just update on NCAA agreed upon procedures and single. If you want to introduce this item.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So in addition to the fiscal year financial audit, we have two other audit-like activities on our IRCC agenda for the year. The first is an update on the single audit, which is essentially the federal audit that URI participates in. And the second is an update on our NCAA agreed upon procedures. So we're going to go first with Mike Johns from CLA, our external auditor that does our financial statements audit and also the single audit. He's going to give a brief update on the single audit. It's brief because there wasn't as much activity as in a normal year. And I will turn it over to Mike to go through those slides, and then we'll turn to NCAA after that. Mike?
Thank you. And hi, everybody. If you don't know me, my name is Mike Johns, principal with Clifton Larson Allen. And go right into the presentation here on the next slide. What is the single audit? The single audit is the compliance audit of major federal programs. So it's called the single audit because when the Single Audit Act came out, various agencies could determine their own audit requirements, which was overly burdensome. And then the Single Audit Act came out, which put a risk-based and size-based criteria in effect for which federal programs are tested as major programs. And the purpose of the audit is an expression of an opinion on compliance. So in the financial statement audit, we're expressing an opinion that the financial statements are free of material misstatement. In a single audit, we would be expressing an opinion on if the major programs are free of material non-compliance. The federal single audit is due 9 months after an institution's fiscal year end. Next slide, please. So with the university, it works a little differently than some other entities in that the university's single audit is included within the state's single audit report. So those major federal programs that required to be audited are selected by the state's auditors, not by CLA. And the university's major programs and/or schedule of expenditures of federal awards are then consolidated with the state's single audit. So the state auditors select the major programs to be audited. And in this fiscal year, for the year ended June 30, 2025, the state auditors did not select any major programs to be audited at the University of Rhode Island. Next slide, please.
Mike, did they do any last year, the year before?
Yes. Last year,
Like
we
for
did audit the
example.
student financial aid cluster.
Yeah, like for example, what did they ask to zero in on?
They don't tell us what to zero in on. They just tell us the federal program to audit. And then we follow the federal compliance supplement on how to test that compliance.
Okay.
So the university still does have to submit a package to the state, which will include the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. So we do have some procedures to perform over that document list, which lists every federal expense by grant identification, award listing number. And we agree that information to the audited books and records for the year ended June 30, 25, and perform some other procedures, including some inquiries and management, making sure nothing has changed from the prior year and comparing it to information we obtained in the audit. And the opinion letter is what we refer to as in relation to opinion. So we're not expressing an opinion on the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. We're expressing an in relation to the audited financial statements opinion. So no major programs this year. Common question might be, well, is any testing done? And the short answer is yes. During the financial statement audit, for example, the research and development grants, which are very material at the university, we test revenue recognition criteria, which looks at the allowability of expenses compared to terms of grants. What does not happen during the financial statement audit is looking at all the compliance attributes that the federal compliance supplement would require for the testing of a major program. So we don't have a report on major programs because there were none this year. We expect probably research and development to be selected next year. It seems to be on a rotational basis between student financial aid and research and development. But again, that's at the discretion of the state auditors. So a very brief presentation that we have today because of that, and happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Mike, for joining us today and for your efforts on the single audit. So the next item that we're going to present on briefly is the NCAA agreed upon procedures. So this is an assessment of our athletics budget and systems that gets submitted to NCAA. It's required to be reviewed by external auditors, but not required to have an opinion or official audit opinion. Last year, CLA did conduct this on our behalf, but this year we engaged James Moore & Co., who has significant experience specifically with university athletics. So I do want to acknowledge our interim athletic director, Brittany Miles, who is here, and also our chief business officer for athletics, Trish Casey, and then Beth West and Katie Davis here from James Moore are going to walk us through the agreed upon procedures. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. We are truly excited to be working with URI on this engagement. And as was mentioned, this was our first year working on this. My name's Katie Davis. I am the partner on this engagement with James Moore, and I also lead our firm's higher education and collegiate athletics practice, where we work with approximately close to 50 Division I institutions around the country. If you want to go to the next slide, I don't necessarily want to keep you in suspense, so I will say there were no findings as a result of our engagement, but I want to give a little bit more background on what the purpose is of this engagement and our approach to it. So all NCAA member institution presidents and chancellors have wanted to gain an understanding of the financial position. So the NCAA created this agreed upon procedures to be able to give those presidents and chancellors the ability to see the results of their operations, revenues, and expenses in what they consider an apples to apples format. So this engagement is conducted pursuant to NCAA bylaws. It is an agreed upon procedures, which is not an audit, so it is less in scope than an audit. The framework that the NCAA—
Katie, sorry to interrupt. Can everyone see the?
I think so.
I think we're good. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
The framework that the NCAA follows for financial reporting is one that they developed. It is not following generally accepted accounting principles. So as a result, if you try to reconcile what's reported in this report to maybe other financial reports that you're used to seeing, you may see some differences there because of that. The financial reporting system that the NCAA has also obtains relevant data that's important for the university to help determine the amount of revenue distribution for grants and aid that they receive from the NCAA for the upcoming year. Next slide. So overall, our approach, we have pretty extensive experience working with Division I institutions, as I mentioned. And so, we go through this agreed upon procedures numerous times during, what they call the audit season. We also regularly work alongside the NCAA in interpreting and updating the financial reporting framework, which they actually did make some updates for this past year. So if you're looking at categories compared to the prior year, you might also see some differences there. We have a dedicated team. I'm joined today by Shane Metzler and Beth West, who led this engagement, and they specialize overseeing an entire team that focuses exclusively on the NCAA agreed upon procedures and our other collegiate athletics engagements. And they have a deep knowledge of the NCAA bylaws, conference requirements, and the evolving landscape of college athletics. We do take a peer-based practical approach. So, we kind of follow best practices across the NCAA and peer Division I institutions, which allows us to be more efficient and consistent in delivering our service. And we try to minimize the operational burden on campus and athletic staff. And instead of, trying to get up to speed on industry matters, we're already aware of that. So we're focused more on institutional matters as our approach. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there were no findings or exceptions on the procedures that we performed. In the agreed upon procedures report, you will see in the back a statement of revenues and expenses, which highlights the operations of the various sports programs. Specifically, it highlights football, men's basketball, women's basketball, all other sports, and then non-program specific financial activity. There are also footnotes and a variance analysis disclosed in the report as well. And I would say really, those areas are athletic department's opportunity to tell their financial story and put a little bit more context around some of the numbers. So with that, just want to turn over and see if there are any questions or if you would like for us to dive into anything more specifically.
Did the firm have any say in the agreed upon procedures, or it all came from NCAA?
So the procedures are prescribed by the NCAA, and they use a certain sampling methodology within their bylaws. So the procedures that we selected for testing are based on a scoping that's also defined by the NCAA. How we approach those procedures is determined by the firm.
Okay.
Are you seeing anything in the industry generally that like in my industry, the financial industry, we know like 3 things the SEC is trying to figure out in their audits. Like, are there any overwhelming themes that you're seeing?
For schools like URI and schools in the A10, nothing specifically overwhelming. I mean, I think what they're going to be looking at starting next year is any schools that opted into the House settlement will be taking a look at revenue share. However, at schools of URI size, there's not necessarily going to be a close microscope on that because you're not likely going to reach the revenue share cap that has been imposed of $22.5 million a year going to athletes. So, that's really the focus. So those larger schools in the power conferences, those are the ones that are most closely looked at. However, we are aware that, there are new strategies that all athletic departments of all sizes are taking to, make the most of this new landscape. So what are some things that URI brings to the table that can be a recruiting advantage, and how do they achieve that financially? So overall, we are seeing some changes in just how athletics and the institution might be working together to maximize some of that exposure from a brand and enrollment perspective, while also making sure that costs are being contained within athletics. And so we take a look at all of that and just kind of understand generally how the university fits within the overall landscape. And I will say there's nothing that seems concerning, and if anything, seem pretty forward-looking and strategic in the outlook for the future.
Thank you.
When did this start? When did they start doing this audit?
When did the NCAA start requiring it?
Yeah, you're trying to dig up this information, right? This is kind of a new phenomenon, NIL and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, has it always been an audit and now it's just changed, or?
It has been in place for a very long time. I don't know that it's changed significantly, the actual procedures themselves. The NCAA did make some updates to certain categories that they have in that statement of revenues and expenses this past year, and they periodically make updates to that to allow for more consistency and clarity in the reporting across different institutions. Really, it's more of just the landscape, I think, and the changes that there are many things that actually had been operating outside of the realm of this because athletes couldn't be paid directly up until this point. So through fiscal year 25, there wasn't really any NIL activity running through the university and this NCAA agreed upon procedures.
Right. So it's safe to say that the NCAA is trying to figure out how to manage this NIL, because some of these universities are going to go bankrupt spending money on athletes. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
It'll be very interesting.
Do you have some clients in the Power conferences?
Yes, I would say we work with probably 25 or more power schools in those power conferences.
Okay.
So we see a broad spectrum. We also work with Division II schools. We work with D1 institutions that don't have football at all. So we see a broad spectrum of different programs.
Yeah, I just want to say we're really appreciative to have James Moore on board to support this, and a lot of work goes into it. So thanks to Brittany and Trish in particular. As has been noted, it's a really increasingly complex landscape, and so having someone that's working with schools all the time, I think, was a really different experience this year. So also appreciate CLA, our broader external auditors. But thank you so much, Katie.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. The next order of business is agenda item 3, which is to go into executive session. We have 3 items in our executive session. They are RIGL 4246582 as it relates to potential litigation, RIGL 46583 as it relates to the matter of security, and RIGL 4246587 as it relates to the question of investments of public funds where the premature disclosure would adversely affect the public interest. May I have a motion that the committee convene into executive session pursuant to RIGL 4246582, RIGL 4246583, and RIGL 4246587 for discussion regarding the university risk register as listed on the agenda?
David Monorano, so move.
Is there a second?
Matt Len, seconded.
Any discussion on the motion? There being no discussion, I'll ask for a voice vote. All in favor, please say yes.
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 Yeah.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. The committee will now convene into executive session for the reasons specified. It's anticipated that the executive session will last approximately 30 minutes, after which the committee will reconvene into open session. The live stream will be paused during the executive session and will resume once the executive session is ended and the committee reconvenes into open session. For all of those participating via WebEx, please confirm by saying yes that there's no other person present or able to hear the discussion on a remote location.
Yes.
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 If you do not automatically move into the breakout session, join the session when prompted on your computer screen by clicking on the Join Now button. Attendees not participating in the executive session will be moved to the waiting room.
Okay, Robbie, you're live.
May I have a motion that the minutes of the committee's executive session be sealed?
David Monterano, so moved.
Is there a second to the motion?
Matt Lenz, second.
Any discussion on the motion? There being no discussion, I'll ask for a voice vote. All in favor, please say yes.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. The next order of business is agenda item 4, action item. And this is for the annual review and consideration of amendments to the Institutional Risk and Compliance Committee Charter and Calendar, and recommendation for approval to the URI Board of Trustees.
Great. I'll mention that we just have 2 suggested changes to the committee calendar, no suggested changes to the committee charter. The 2 changes to the calendar are to change the title of the formerly known as Affirmative Action Plan to the Non-Discrimination Plan that you received a presentation on earlier today. And then the second is we previously had on the calendar a review of potential changes to the charter and calendar in January and then approval in June. And since the IRCC now is only meeting 4 meetings versus 5 a year, we wanted to just streamline that to review and approval of suggested changes to the charter and calendar in January. Obviously, if someone has concerns, we can move a vote to June if we need to, but we thought it would be administratively more efficient just to review changes and approve them in the January meeting. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Sounds like we have no opposition to efficiency, so I'll file a motion. May I have a motion that the committee recommend that the board approve amendments to the IRCC calendar as presented in the enclosure?
So moved, Joe Formicola.
Second,
To
David
the-
Monterano.
Any discussion on the motion? I'll ask for a voice vote. All in favor, please say yes.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. The next order of business is agenda item 5, and that's to adjourn. May I have a motion to adjourn?
David Monterano, so move.
Matt Lenz, seconded.
I'll ask for a voice vote. All in favor, please say yes.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion to adjourn is approved. The next meeting of the IRCC is tentatively scheduled for June of 2026. And right on time, 10:29 minutes to spare. Well done, guys.